demanding climate action now. We're very honored to be with our distinguished chair of the Select Committee, Congresswoman Kathy Castor of Florida, who's been a champion on this issue even before she came to Congress. The American people know that the climate crisis is an existential threat of our generation, of our time, a crisis manifested in natural disasters of epic proportions. Today, the House Democratic majority is honoring the will of the people and taking first strong steps to protect our planet and our future. The bill, this is about jobs. It's about good, paying, green jobs. It's about advancing our economy and our global preeminence in green technology. It's about health. It's about public health and clean air and clean water for our children. It's about defending our national security. The evidence is clear. The national security experts have spoken. This is a national security issue. And for many of us, it's a moral issue. If you believe, as I do, that this is God's creation, this planet, we have a moral responsibility to be good stewards of it. But even if you don't subscribe to that, you know we have a moral responsibility to future generations to pass on this planet in a responsible way. This bill is only step one. The Select Committee on the Climate Crisis and Committees of Jurisdiction, we have made this really, our caucus has made this a caucus-wide priority. The Select Committee taking the lead on this, but all of the committees of jurisdiction acting upon it, and whether it pertains to jobs or health or national security or our moral responsibility for the planet. But it is a Congress-wide initiative. So today we're going to hear from one of the champions of climate action as to where we go from here. I couldn't be more proud of her leadership. She has really been so wise, but also so determined to make a difference. Madam Chair, Kathy Castor.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for making the climate crisis one of your flagship issues in your previous tenure as Speaker, and now when we've moved from a Select Committee on Global Warming and Energy Independence, we've lost a lot of time. Now we have a climate crisis on our hands, and I'm proud to be chairing the Select Committee and honored to introduce Climate Action Now, H.R. 9, with colleagues and climate leaders here today. Speaking as a Floridian who boarded up my home with my family and fled as Hurricane Irma and its destructive winds and threatening storm surge was bearing down on my community a year and a half ago, I understand that we must act with urgency. We were lucky because we had time to get out of the way. But for too many Americans, there is no getting out of the way of the climate crisis. Flooding, torrential rains, extreme heat and drought, public health crises, rising costs and temperatures. This is the climate crisis. And when Americans see a crisis, we respond. It was with America's leadership and engagement that the U.S. led other nations to climate action in the International Paris Climate Agreement. The agreement was a breakthrough. After years of playing the blame game, the United States, China, India, and nearly every other country on Earth came up with a plan to address climate change together and take climate action now. And that plan has incredible upsides. We can create millions of good-paying, clean energy jobs right now. We can save billions of dollars in energy costs for working people and businesses right now. We can finally address decades of environmental injustice right now. And we can respond to the incredible groundswell of activism from young people who are demanding climate action now as well. They are the first generation to grow up in the climate crisis. Now they are demanding a chance to be the generation that solves it. So despite what the President has said, America will not retreat. America will not cut and run. America will keep its commitments. Climate Action Now will unleash American ingenuity and innovation to power the future. And the speaker is right. We have a moral obligation to future generations to tackle the climate crisis now. We can do this, and together we will. I'm very proud to introduce now my partner, my chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Frank Pallone.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. I just want to take a page from what Kathy Castor said and talk about my district. My district was the most heavily hit by Superstorm Sandy. And I'm telling you, there isn't a single mayor, county, state legislative official, and I have a lot of Republicans who are Republican who don't understand that we need to address climate change because of sea level rise and the destruction that we had from hurricane or from Superstorm Sandy. So I was very happy when we took the majority that we were actually able to have hearings in the Energy and Commerce Committee on climate change because Republicans refused to do it for the whole 8 years. And we've had some. We had one on the Paris Agreement. We have another one next week coming out on what state and local governments are doing. But the fact of the matter is that state and local governments can't carry this ball alone. I mean, this is, as Nancy Pelosi said, this is an abrogation of our federal responsibility and our leadership as a country. I mean, the president doesn't make any sense at all when he says he wants to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, because all the other countries now take up that mantle of leadership that the United States had. And it's not just an issue of helping our allies and being the good guys, it's also an economic issue. I mean, the bottom line is if we can create jobs, when we move towards renewable resources, we can build the wind turbines and build the solar panels and, you know, and boost our economy. It's an economic issue as well as a health and safety issue. And for us to abdicate our leadership makes no sense. So basically what Kathy's bill is doing is saying, no, we are going to take the mantle of leadership. We are not going to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. And we are going to do whatever we can to say to the president, look, you say you're going to withdraw from Paris. What is your plan? How are we going to address these climate issues? You know, we refuse to accept the notion that this is not something that needs to be addressed. So, Mr. President, we're saying to you with this legislation, we're not withdrawing from Paris. We want to know what your plan is. And if you don't have one, then we're going to move forward on our own and come up with things that we can do here in the Congress and in the Energy and Commerce Committee to address climate change in various ways. So with that, I just wanted to say I started out with you as an Energy and Commerce member. Now I'm turning it over to, and everybody knows he's the chairman of Foreign Affairs, but he's also a very strong member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Eliot Engel.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I want to especially thank our speaker who's made this front and center. It's just so important. The New York City metropolitan area, of course, also suffered with Hurricane Superstorm Sandy, which some people call the perfect storm, but we're going to have a lot of perfect storms if we sit and twiddle our thumbs and do nothing about it for the next several years. Before we had the election, I got together all the members, the Democratic members of the Foreign Affairs Committee, to see what the priority would be in the new Congress. And overwhelmingly, number one was global warming, global climate change. We feel so strongly about it on a global level. So as chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I view climate change as a threat to global security and to our country's future. I also believe that the United States is strongest on the global stage when we're working shoulder to shoulder with our friends and partners around the world. And that's why the Paris Agreement was such a defining moment for the future of our planet. The countries of the world came together to face this global crisis, and at times like these, the world usually looks to the United States for leadership. Then came along President Trump. Instead of leading, he withdrew, retreating from the world stage. It's really absolutely shameful. We're already seeing the consequences of inaction, natural disasters, famines, instability, human suffering. So addressing climate change is a critical foreign policy priority, and it's up to Congress to lead. And we will lead. That's why next week we'll be holding a hearing on the dangers of climate change to our national security in the Foreign Affairs Committee. And today's legislation sends a message loud and clear to the President and the entire world: we aren't backing down. The Climate and Action Now Act keeps the United States in the Paris Climate Accord, renewing our country's pledge to address climate change head-on. It's not just smart policy, it's a moral obligation to our children and our grandchildren and generations to come. We have to get to the day when we can look at ourselves in the mirror and know we did everything we could to save our planet. So, Madam Speaker, thank you. Today's bill gets us one step closer to that, and you can count on all of us here today to keep up this momentum in the months to come. Thank you, and it's now my pleasure to call on my colleague, Eddie Bernice Johnson, Chairman Eddie Bernice Johnson.
Thank you very much, and good morning. This is an important subject, obviously, and it's not an exaggeration to say that climate change is one of the greatest challenges confronting our nation. On the Science Committee, we've already heard from scientists about the reality of human-induced climate change and its impacts. Those impacts are affecting our economy, our national security, and our quality of life. The increased frequency of extreme weather events in recent years is just one reminder of the growing cost of inaction on addressing climate change. The Paris Agreement was a significant step forward in bringing the international community together to address climate change, and I was proud that the United States played a critical role in forging the agreement under the Obama administration. And we had American citizens who pledged millions of dollars in research to support this agreement. The agreement also helped to catalyze private sector involvement in seeking innovative energy technologies and other means to reduce our carbon footprint. And the Science Committee will be examining those approaches in weeks and months to come. I've had many visitors from the private sector community, CEOs. The CEO of ExxonMobil, as a matter of fact, has come to say that we're ready to do collaboration. A large research lab in New Jersey that we plan to visit is awaiting our visit. The Trump administration's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement is both misguided and ill-advised. Rather than pretend that the human-induced climate change doesn't exist, we need to do all that we can to work to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, which this bill specifies. And I know that the members here share that commitment today. I thank you for being here, and now I will call on a member of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, Mr. Caston.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Johnson. It's a pleasure to serve on your committee, and I'm delighted to have started with, I think, 2 climate hearings to start off our cycle. I'm thankful to be here with Speaker Pelosi and Chair Castro to introduce H.R. 9, the Climate Action Now Act. I came to Congress after working for 16 years as a clean energy executive. If I learned one thing from my time in the energy sector, it's that there are no economic and there are no technical barriers to lowering CO2. Anything we do to lower CO2 means we're going to burn less fuel, which means we're going to save money. This is not a cost to be feared. This is an investment opportunity that we'd be fools to miss out on. We have the tools. We have the ability. What we've lacked is leadership. Instead of rising to this challenge, President Trump ran away from it. Instead of harnessing American ingenuity, what companies like ours have done, this administration walked away from the Paris Agreement. American leadership is not about kowtowing to despots. It's not about declaring phony emergencies to build unnecessary walls. It's not about ignoring the single most serious threat to the existence of human life on Earth. From Normandy to the Cold War, American leadership has been about identifying long-term existential threats to the entire population and then leading the rest of the world to mobilize around a shared set of goals and values. That's what we need. H.R. 9 challenges the Trump administration to step up and show us their plan for combating climate change. I'm proud to be a member of the Select Committee, where we're going to help shape this chamber's vision of how to transition to a low and ultimately zero carbon economy. The Climate Action Now is the first step of many we will need, but it is an important one, and I'm proud to help this effort under the strong Democratic House leaders. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my friend, my colleague, and fellow clean energy nerd, Congressman Levin.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Speaker Pelosi. Thank you to Chair Castor. Like Sean, I'm incredibly honored to be on the Select Committee. I'm standing here today because I saw what this administration was doing to reverse our progress on climate change, embracing fossil fuel lobbyists and letting corporate polluters run free. And I decided that I personally had to do more. So I decided to run for Congress as a clean energy advocate, and I spoke frequently about the need to embrace science and the scientific consensus that climate change is happening, that it is driven by human activity, and that if we do nothing, the consequences for our planet will be catastrophic. Never let anyone tell you that you can't protect the environment and grow the economy at the same time. We're doing it in the state of California, where we've led, and we can lead in Washington as well if we're embracing science and reality about our environment and our economy. And the clean energy jobs of the future, where I was very privileged to work in that industry for about 15 years. I'm very proud in the work that we did to grow a more sustainable economy. And in my Southern California district, as is the case across this country, we're experiencing more extreme heat waves, longer droughts, more intense wildfires, rising sea levels, and unprecedented coastal erosion. We must not wait to act. Ultimately, this is about the planet that we'll leave behind for future generations. My wife and I have a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old at home, and we've got to support solutions that are up to the challenges that we face, where again, we embrace the science and the evidence and allow that to drive the policy. There's so much more we must do to combat the climate crisis, but H.R. 9 is a down payment. This is a step in the right direction towards setting that foundation for action on climate once again. Thank you. I'm so grateful to turn it over now to another wonderful freshman, my friend from Boulder, Colorado, Joe Neguse.
Well, thank you, Representative Levin, my good friend and colleague. They're wonderful freshmen serving on this select committee, and I want to thank Madam Speaker and Chairwoman Castor for your leadership with respect to the select committee and, of course, introducing this important bill and convening us today on such an important issue. I don't know that I could say it any better than the Speaker did, that climate change fundamentally is an existential threat that we must begin tackling head-on immediately. The science is perfectly clear. We have a very short runway to avoid very catastrophic consequences for our planet, and this moment really does require bold action now from the Congress. We've already seen devastating effects of climate change on our coasts, our forests, our farmland, and our communities. In Colorado, as Representative Levin mentioned, I represent City of Boulder, City of Fort Collins. In my district, over 50% of the area that I represent is public lands. And so my constituents are certainly already feeling the significant impacts of this crisis, including increased flooding and erosion, rising temperatures, and faster snowmelt. Like Representative Levin, I'm a father as well. My wife and I have a 6-month-old daughter, Natalie, and so much of the work we do in Congress I see through the prism of being a father and thinking about the world that she will inherit. Our duty to her, our duty to the rest of humanity, really is to do everything in our power to leave this world better than how we found it, and to ensure that our next generation, that my daughter's generation, receives a planet better than the one we ourselves received. And our actions as a nation right now are currently not living up to this duty. The administration's decision to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accords and halt progress being made forward is severely detrimental to our planet and to the next generation. We are the only country to reject this global pact. We can and we must do better. Now is not the time for ignorance. It is not the time for shortcuts. It is the time for action. We must act, and we must act on climate now. And so I, again, want to thank the Speaker. I want to thank the distinguished colleagues that are gathered here today, and we'll turn it to our wonderful chairwoman of the Select Committee to close. Thank you again.
So as you can see, it's not just the entire House Democratic Caucus, but it's these talented, smart, young members that have been chosen to lead on the Select Committee on the climate crisis. I want to thank again Speaker Pelosi. It's no coincidence that you're also a mother and a grandmother and understand this moral obligation we have to future generations in this planet. I also want to thank the colleagues who are in attendance today. From the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, we also have Don McEachin of Virginia, and Julia Brownlee from California. We are eager to get to work, but the first order of business will be H.R. 9, Climate Action Now, that will be marked up in the committees of jurisdiction over the coming weeks and then brought to the floor for passage. Thank you all for being here today.
Oh, this one? Yeah, that's a really good stuff. Oh, yeah, I winged it a little bit.